Hi, everyone. This is Krista Moore, and welcome to the Krista Moore Show. This is my way of bringing you guests that can share their stories of passion and purpose, and we get to better understand why people do what they do and the impact that they're having on the world. So I'm excited to introduce to you today my guest, and we actually just met on our pre-call, but this is Sarah Madras. And Sarah, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Krista. It's a pleasure to
So,
meet you.
and I'm really intrigued by you being a certified Dare to Lead a facilitator, and also what is referred to as a mindset transformational expert. So I'm going to be learning from you today as well as our audience. But first off, why don't you tell me a little bit about you? And I don't mean like what you do today, but who you are at your core and what's your story?
So, who I am at my core, I would say
Yeah.
who I am at my core is a seeker of the truth. So, trust is my number one core value in everything I do, in every like who I am, the choices I make, kind of all is in alignment with that. And being a seeker of the truth and learning and understanding people, not just on a surface level, but their core self and that deeper meaning.
Is that from like a Strengths Finders, or how did you discover what is at your core that value of yours is so prominent?
I think it's always been there. And it wasn't until I did the certified Dare to Lead process and we go through a whole core values activity. And then that's where it all made sense and brought it together of like, oh, so as a kid, the things that would trigger me and make me the most upset are tied to my core values. And so when people would be dishonest or they would break trust, like that was something that was a no-go for me. And so once I learned that those are the keys of how we know what our core values are, it all made sense.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about that. One of the things that I believe is that we are all born with God-given gifts, and it's up to us to discover or rediscover what they are so that we can give them back to the world.
Yep.
And when we do, then we're living a life of purpose and meaning and really having joy and the most impact we can on others.
Mhm.
So what I heard you say is you actually spent some time reflecting or studying or going through a program that helped you identify, what are some of those core values that you could bring out in your business?
For sure. And I have to say, I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you just said.
Okay.
So,
Yay.
yes, yes. And it is. And it's funny when we look back after we've done this work and do the self exploration and walk through the process, that it all just makes sense. Like our life just makes sense. So, those innate gifts that you were talking about, one of mine is the ability that when people speak, I can listen 3 to 5 levels lower. And so they're talking here, and I'm hearing down here to what the root is of an unmet need or their deepest desires. And then I'm able to reflect that back to them so that they have a deeper understanding of themselves and create that new level of self awareness.
Wow. And that's a huge strength, right?
Mhm.
So now I'm connecting the dots on why you do what you do
Correct.
in your business. And I guess the message that I would love for the audience to hear is that we all have our unique strengths and gifts. And we do need to spend some time in coursework or learning or reading or assessments or prayer or meditation, whatever your modality is, to do that self reflection and kind of know thyself
Yep. That
and then be
discovery.
able discovery. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm all about discovery in a lot of the work that I do. And then there's that other added component for me that is coming up, which is creating. So I think it's about creating something with what you discover. Actually, you can see back on my the word create. That's my word of the year for 2022.
Love it. I
Yeah.
love it. And look
Oh,
at you already ahead of the game,
oh yeah. Right. I'm an overachiever.
right?
I already have my word of the year for 2022. So let's start by answering the question that I have for you is why then did you go to the certification for Dare to Lead? I mean, why is that something that really tugged at your heart and was something that you wanted to do?
Mhm. Well, it's interesting because when I started this whole journey, my background is as a licensed mental health therapist. And so I did therapy with clients for almost 2 decades. And what we call our call to courage are these moments where it's like the little taps from the universe. And when I first moved here in 2005, every place that I worked at, I noticed things that were not okay. There were toxic work environments. And so I would leave that one and I would go to another one in the hopes of like, this one's going to be better. Well, by the time I made it to the third one and they just kept getting worse and worse, that was my call to courage of, like a lot of us leaders do, when we can't find what it is that we need, then we build it for ourselves and for others because we know it's not just us that's needing it and is seeking it. So that's what started me out on my entrepreneurial journey. And I created my own counseling center so that clients and other therapists would have that place that has a courageous culture where we can show up with our whole selves, where we feel empowered, and where we can get quality services. And so that experience is what kicked it off for me.
Yeah. And what I heard in that story is that you've taken your experience. We're all born with those strengths in our DNA. And then we have these experiences, and your background being therapy and mental health, bringing that into the business world is quite brave.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And is that where the
well, and I really owe it to my clients, right? Because they were the ones telling me, Sarah, if I only would have learned these skills 20 years ago, my life would have been so much easier. And then they would say, and now that I have the skills, our family is great. I feel solid and connected as in my relationship. I feel like I'm showing up as my best self as a parent. And they go, but now I go to my workplace and I see all the problems and that people there don't have the skills. And they're like, can you come to my workplace and start doing it there? And so that was my second call to courage, where I was like, okay, I'm being shown this is where I'm needed and the next level that I'm needing at. And so that's when I started coaching organizations and inside businesses in order to help create those cultures in the workplace as well.
Yeah, that's a great story. We titled this show Vulnerability as a Superpower.
Yeah.
Tell me more about what you feel and think about that title, Vulnerability as a Superpower. What does that mean to you?
Well, to me, vulnerability is one of our greatest superpowers that we can all tap into, because it is a skill like anything else. Just like we had to learn to read and we had to learn to write, vulnerability is a skill that we can learn as well. It's just we've been told, or let me ask you, when you think of vulnerability, what's the first things that come into your mind?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is weakness. I think that that's kind of what we're programmed to
Correct.
think. And weakness.
Yeah. And that's why I ask, is because most people grew up being programmed of vulnerability means weakness. But all over 400,000 pieces of data show that actually being vulnerable is our greatest measure of courage. Because vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And so can you think of a time in your life when you were faced with uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, and then you had the courage to show up anyways? So that's why vulnerability is our greatest measure of courage. Can you think of a courageous moment where there wasn't uncertainty, risk, or emotional exposure?
So how do you teach the skills? How do you actually, identify that this is a need, and then teach the skills to make that shift, turn that vulnerability into a strength or a superpower or something that can be overcome? Is there a quick answer to that?
Well, there's actually 4 courage skill sets that we utilize.
Yeah, let's talk about them. What are they?
So the first one is living into your values. And that's why figuring out what your core values are is so important. So it's your personal core values. And then in the workplace, it's figuring out, well, what are the core values of that workplace, of the organization? The second
is that for me, what comes to mind for that is just understanding and clarity and awareness. of what those core values are so that you can move forward living them. I mean, when you're talking about core values as one of the four.
Well, so this is what happens in workplaces. Like literally when I'm going in there and I'll ask them, do you know what the core values are? Write it down. And they'll write down and I'll collect the papers and everyone has something different written on their paper. And a lot of times they're riding around in cars that have the core values painted on the car.
Yeah.
Or it's
but
like,
they have their, as you walk in the room or in the office, they're on the wall, but nobody's living them, right?
correct. And so it's not just about professing and like claiming them. It's about operationalizing them and behavioralizing them so that they show up and are part of the culture and the daily interaction, the decision making. It becomes a roadmap for how you make decisions.
And hiring.
Correct.
Yeah,
for sure.
hiring for sure.
Yes.
So what's number 2?
So number 2 is trust, and trust being the foundation of all successful organizations. Trust is the foundation of everything, and business is no different.
Yeah.
So just like trust in marriage or relationships, the same thing holds true.
Yeah, one of my favorite books is The Speed of Trust by Stephen M. R. Covey. He talks a lot about that. Well, that's what the whole book's about, right?
Right.
And really just the speed of business transactions and success of companies when that trust is the foundation.
For sure. And what I loved, what attracted me so much to the work of Brene Brown is that she took trust from like this really, most people are like, well, I don't lie, I don't cheat, I don't steal, so I'm totally trustworthy. And she broke it down into 7 actionable, observable, and measurable components. And so it's been one of the biggest game changers.
Yeah.
The third one is rumbling with vulnerability. And so vulnerability is like a third of the entire course. And it's really being able to go into situations and conversations without feeling like you have to perform, prove, or perfect. Those are ways that we show up and put armor on to try to protect ourselves. We say, oh, I'm going to prove how I'm right. And that's how we're going to protect ourselves. Or I'm going to perform and be so charismatic. And so then I'm not going to get hurt. Or I'm going to show up and I'm going to make sure I'm absolutely perfect so that you can't say anything bad or you can't reject me.
Yeah.
That's how we're trying to keep ourselves safe.
Yeah, those are 3 big ones. And it really hit home. And I know there's a lot of discussion and talk today around vulnerability. But when you break it down into those 3 areas, that really makes sense to me. Because the imposter syndrome, as an example, or fake it till you make it, or I'm gonna show up and be who others expect me to be rather than who I am at my at my core, or because I don't feel worthy, or all of those areas that come into the vulnerability play.
For sure.
So what are you doing? Creating an environment where it's okay and it's not perceived as a weakness?
Correct. And so when we equip people with these 4 courage skills, and they realize, oh, wait a minute, this is my superpower, that I don't have to carry around all that armor. So we call it armor. So every time that you want to perform or prove or perfect, you're carrying around all this heavy armor that stops you from connecting with people and stops you from truly being seen. And so it's so freeing and fulfilling to be able to take off all that armor, show up as who you are, your full self in the workplace and at home. So there's full integration. And to just know, hey, I have the courage and the confidence that I can show up without any armor on, and whatever comes my way, I'm going to be able to, we'll figure it out. I'll handle it. And even if I fall, because that's the 4th courage skill, even if I fall, even if I get hurt, even if there's a setback, I'm going to rise stronger. And so we teach those resiliency skills of how to rise stronger from the setbacks so that you can show up and be completely brave and create that culture so that everybody is showing up brave and being their best self, because that's where innovation, creativity, and fulfillment lives, in that juicy, warm, yummy space.
Wow, this is like really making me nervous. let me tell you why. So I'm imagining you going into businesses and teams and teaching and walking through these concepts. And gosh, I mean, it's a process, right? If you
Yes.
don't have number one and number two, you're never going to get to number three.
Hmm.
And when I say it makes me nervous or scary, because I would imagine that that's how the participant is feeling, because now we're almost getting forced to be real.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that trust factor has to be there before someone's going to go to step number three. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that the difference is it's definitely something that one, creating that safe container where the participants can feel safe and trust to open themselves up. And like
Yes.
you said, it's a process. I'm not going in on day one and be like, share your deepest, darkest secret with me in front of this whole group of your coworkers.
Mhm.
And they have the personal choice of, yes, I'm opting into this because I want to be a part of this culture. So they're not
Okay.
forced to be there. Or even if they feel I have to show up because I'm being forced to be here. One of my favorite stories is because I do work with law enforcement as well.
Mhm.
And the officer came in full tattoos, big guy, had his, full gear on, full uniform, all the things. And one of the first questions I ask is, what are you needing from today? And, what support are you needing? And he was like, I'm just here because I have to be, because I'm required to be. So I'm just here. Well, by the end of our time together, that is the same person who is saying, I'm so glad I showed up for this. I'm so glad we did this. I feel so much closer to my team and within the organization. I have all these skills. He's the one who's making videos for me even to this day saying, it's helped me at work. It's helped me in my personal life. I've utilized it for co-parenting. And so I love it when even people come up and they show up the first day and they're nervous because it's new. They don't know what to expect. And by the end of the process, they're all in because they see and experience the benefits firsthand right there.
Yeah, and you know what I hear from that is your therapy work, right? I mean, and you have the superpower of listening,
Mhm.
but there's two pieces, and that's that individual felt like they belonged to something bigger than themselves
Mhm.
because they participated in this, and they felt the connection,
Yeah,
whether that was a connection with you or the connection with their coworkers. I mean, that's an outcome, right?
exactly. Exactly. 100%. 100%. For sure. And when you think about it, we're hardwired for connection and belonging.
Yes.
And so when we feel that sense of a connection, we're willing, I'll say this. One of my team members, she said to me, I'll walk through fear anytime for you. And that's because we have that connection and she feels that sense of belonging. And we've created that courageous culture of, even when I'm nervous, I'll walk through fear for you because we have this shared mission.
Hmm. So, what do you see the future of these businesses whose core values align nicely with what we're talking about, and that they actually embrace that and start changing their work culture? What's the future look like for them?
Mhm. So what's so interesting, and that what I love, like if we can take anything from the hard times that's been the last, year and a half or whatever of COVID, it's that we have all this new knowledge of what is meaningful to us. Where is my purpose? And so the workplace is shifting from the old leadership style of fall in line, just show up and punch your ticket, don't ask questions, just like get your paycheck, and the power over hierarchy model.
Yes. Uh-huh.
It's shifting into, okay, people want meaning attached to their work. They want to know how their job connects to the bigger purpose of the organization. They want to feel like their voice is heard. They want to feel valued and appreciated. And if they don't, they're willing to leave and find something else. Hence our great resignation that we're
Yeah.
going through right now.
Hashtag great
Yes,
resignation.
totally. And so they're realizing,
Wow, timing's perfect. I mean, timing is perfect for what you're doing. I mean, it's like just the stars and moons are aligned.
right,
You have a service that they are desperate for and need. Yeah.
Correct. Because if we don't shift into the courageous culture, it's kind of like adapt or die. Like, and so it's
Mhm.
needed now more than ever because 5 or 10 years from now, the landscape is going to be totally different. And people are craving that connection and that belonging, not just in their personal lives, but in their workplace too.
Yeah, I get that.
Mhm.
That's exciting.
It is.
So tell me, this mindset transformational expert.
Mhm.
I would say that you've dispelled any vulnerability, or to call yourself a mindset transformational expert. Tell me about that, and why are you the expert?
Well, I would say definitely I'm so tremendously grateful for my education and my background as a mental health therapist. That has been my it's sacred ground.
Mhm.
And so I'm very aware of that privilege and responsibility that comes with being the keeper of people's secrets for so long and having that superpower to really see who they are at the core of them. And so for me, it's taking that and helping people understand their own stories because our brains are story making machines. We automatically create a story every time something happens. But just because our brain makes a story does not mean that that story is true. And so that's where the mindset work comes in, is saying, all right, how is this story serving you? And I always tease that it's like trying on a pair of jeans. And I'm like, that pair of jeans that you have on, AKA the story, I'm like, man, it's causing you to feel anxious. Like you're feeling depressed.
Mhm.
You're feeling stuck and trapped. I'm like, man, those jeans are so tight. They're suffocating you. I'm like, why don't you take those jeans off, try on a different pair of jeans, that a different story, and man, those jeans, those are those perfect jeans where you're like, my butt looks so good in these jeans. I want to wear them everywhere. And they feel comfortable and
And you're comfortable.
empowering.
Mhm.
Yes. And you feel confident in them. And you feel like with this jeans, I can conquer the world. I was like, choose which pair. Like we have the option to choose which
It's all
store.
decisions, right?
Mhm,
Make that
mhm.
decision, which pair are you gonna wear today?
Exactly, exactly. Yep, yep.
Wow. One of the things that I am curious about too is the Brene Brown attachment, and what really drew you to her,
Mhm.
as a leader of these causes, and, yeah, what were you feeling?
Right.
What were you wanting to do?
So, you know, when you hear a podcast or you read a book and you're like, oh my gosh, that person came into my body and they knew everything that's in my soul, everything that's in my brain, and they took who I am and put it into words externally. That's what it felt like for
So it
me
was
with
kind of
Renee.
like an out of body experience.
Yes, yes. That's what Brene was for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's like, she is me. I am her. We understand each other. These are my people.
I wanna be her.
Right. I was like, she gets me.
Yeah, she has that way.
Yes, yes. And so that's when I was like, all right, let me figure out how can I do this? And so I actually sent her team an email and said, your work is so profound. I want to be able to share it with more people. How
Mhm.
can I do that without you suing me? Is what I said to
Yeah.
them. I said, I really want to be in alignment and ethical and have integrity. So tell me, how can I do this? And they responded back and said, well, you can become certified in our work and then you are free to do whatever you want. And so I was like, I am all in.
Yeah, you're in.
Yes.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to tell you that I'm really thrilled to have met you. I think that the message that you can bring to so many, not only in business and life and in relationships, is powerful. And the timing's perfect for people to kind of open up their hearts and open up their minds
Mhm.
to receive this information. So you decided to have a little fun and you created a podcast. Why don't you tell us about that? And then I want to make sure that other people know how to reach you and the best way to contact and connect with you.
Yes. Yes. So, yes, the podcast started back in February of 2019. And myself and my co host, Jenny, she brought this idea to me and was like, hey, I have this idea for a podcast. Are you in? And at the time I was like, you know what? I don't know if I have the bandwidth for this. Like, what is this? What is the purpose of this?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, I just really want us to connect with people who are willing to show up, be vulnerable, share their truth, like that raw, real story, so that we can spread the word about it's okay to show up and not be perfect. You don't have to prove, you don't have to perform here. You just get to show up and be who you are. We can create that space. And I was like, well, that's fully aligned with who I am.
Yeah,
So
that
I'm
sounds
in,
great.
let's do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we have Girls Who Do Stuff. I love the title. I like the logo. It's
Thank
great.
you.
And speaking of logos, so I just received your new logo, and I think you did some new rebranding. Is there a story behind that?
Yes, there is. There is. So my rebranding coach, he was like, Sarah, like I like your logo, but it just is not elevated like you are. He's like, you're way too magical for that. Let's figure something out. And figuring out a logo is actually a really long process.
Yeah, I've been through that.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
And I said, well, my spirit animal is a horse. I was like, I just feel this kindred connection with them. They have that sense and that empathy, and they can tell people's emotions. And he's like, nope, not magical enough. And I was like, dude, I don't know what to tell you. And so this is where our spouses are like our greatest gifts.
Mm-hmm.
So I was frustrated with my coach, and I was talking to my husband about it. And he was like, you're not the Joan of Arc who's in the armor on the horse running in. He goes, you are the horse who goes into hard conversations, goes into conflict, but you're not armored up. Your chest is open. You're completely vulnerable. And you're like, the horse isn't wearing any armor. Their chest is bare and they're going in anyways. He's like, that's who you are.
Yeah.
And so I went back to my coach and I said, I am a horse and that is it. And I'm a horse.
Well, and now that you've told me that, and now that I know you a little bit, I'm really looking at this logo differently, right? And I'm seeing this horse coming out of the box. The wings, I've got my angel wings back here. My whole house has wings all over it, and it has a lot of connection for me. But I also feel like you can take your clients and they can safely ride on you, that you can take them in a whole new direction.
Right.
And they can feel safe, but yet vulnerable in a good way.
Yeah.
Alongside you or with you. I love that. I think the
thank
story
you for
behind
that.
your
I
logo.
hadn't even thought of that, but thank you for that.
Yeah. I'm ready to climb on the back of that horse and fly.
My coach is going to love that. I'll share that with him later today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm assuming like the coming out of the box thing is part of that.
Correct. We want to free ourselves, because that's what he said to me. He's like, fine, you're a horse, but you're more magical than a regular horse. He's like, you're a Pegasus. You have wings and you're flying and breaking free. And I was like, deal.
And I would add to that in your business, you can carry people along with you.
Right.
You're going to help them. They're like following you.
Right. Yes.
On your back or behind you, kind of coming out of their own box.
Yep. And that's kind of what it is at the beginning when they're feeling nervous. I'm like, it's okay. I got you. Climb on board. Mm-hmm. We'll go together. Like I'll carry you with me until you feel comfortable. And then they feel comfortable. And then we're next to each other. They're flying next to me. And then when they feel a little bit more comfortable and confident, then they're flying in front of me and I'm cheering them on the whole way. You
need a tagline. Yeah. Carrying. Yeah. You need a tagline. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but just based on what we're just talking about now, there's a tagline there somewhere that can explain that logo a little bit more, because there's so much in that.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. That's why it's like a logo is never just a logo. There's so much meaning in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's brand new. So I'm glad we got to introduce it in the show today.
Yes. Thank you for asking that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Great. Well, nice to meet you. And I hope that our guests got some value from today. And if they want to learn more about you and learn more about your business, right here's where to find you.
Correct. Yep. SarahMadras.com. And I'm on social media. So LinkedIn is Sarah Madras. Instagram and Facebook is Sarah Madras Coaching. And my email is scrolling at the bottom. Again, Sarah@SarahMadras.com. Try to keep it real easy.
Yeah, right. There you go. And Girls Who Do Stuff podcast.
Correct.
Check
Yes.
that out. All right. Take care, Sarah. Thank you
Thank you so much
being
for
with us
having me on.
today.
I greatly appreciate it.
All righty. Bye-bye.